Technology in Stellaris is one of the most crucial resources in the game. The more you have, the more efficient your planets, produce resources, and you can also get bigger ships. The 4.0 update has changed so much in the game, including mechanics around technology. So in this video, I'm going to break down everything to do with technology by showing you every way you can get tech, buff it up, and how to maximize it. Let's first start at the basics with a brief overview of how tech actually works. So the first way of getting technology is from the output of your scientists. We now in 4.0 have each class split up into physicists, biologists, and engineers. These produce technology, physics, society, and engineering. Now these pops are working this job and it is giving us 9.39 physics technology. Now the base is 7.92, but then it's getting buffed up by things like egalitarian, it's on the empire capital, and high stability. These are buffs to job output. We then have job efficiency. As you can see, we have 120 workforce, but it's actually working 132 because we're getting 10% more efficiency for researcher jobs from the intelligent trait. This all leads to output. Now you can see the individual output up here, and we're producing a base and then some from jobs and maybe even stations. If we then come over to the technology tab and we say select some research, you can see there is a number that is needed for each technology. These numbers go into this number, and once you have the full number, you get that technology. We also have research speed. This is a percentage modifier above each technology, and you can see we're getting 10% more output, which means we're actually progressing 21.33 progress per month. This is 10% added on to our 19.39, which then gets added to this technology. You get research speed from multiple ways. We will look at that in more depth later, but at the minute, because we're materialist, we're getting 5%, Spark of Genius 3%, and then Head of Research 2%. Because of the way numbers work, you want to maximize both of these. Obviously, it's easier to get massive base numbers, but any percentage modifier you have just works so well with increasing your base modifier too. So really try and get both going when you can. It's also important to note there is a tech tree, although it doesn't show it in game. You can check this out, link in the description. But basically how this works is if you want cold fusion power, you're going to need fusion power tier 1. Now you can see there's actually tiers here. So jump drives, for example, is tier 5. What this essentially means is you need 6 technologies from the previous tier to start unlocking the next tier. And this is in each category. So you need 6 physics tier 1s to go to tier 2. You need 6 different tier 1 societies to go to tier 2. This means if you are more of an advanced player and you're trying to rush down a technology, let's say mega engineering, it's a tier 5, so you're going to need 6 tier 1s, 6 tier 2s, 6 tier 3s, and 6 tier 4s before you get the chance of unlocking this. And yes, it goes more in depth, which we're not going to look at every single tech for this, but there's different modifiers to those technologies coming up. For example, mega engineering, you can increase this by having more star holds and citadels. You can have a habitat, a neighboring country has mega engineering, or if you actually have a megastructure or the origin shattered ring. Some techs also need multiple prerequisites from different tiers. For example, mega engineering needs 0-point reactor, I believe that is, and citadels. Yes, 0-point power, sorry. That's basically the backbone of technology, but in this video I'm going to show you how to maximize it, so you don't really need to care about the tech tree, but it's important to know this exists if you want to play even more advanced and rush down at different technologies. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty, you need to know what the settings do when you start your game. Tech cost essentially just controls how much those tech costs cost. The default is 1x. If you lower it, the tech costs are going to cost less, but for every empire in the game. So it doesn't give you an advantage, it just makes the game speed feel faster. And it's why in my videos you see me play at 0.5 and 0.75, but if you want a longer game, you could bump this up. It's a personal preference thing. The meta is usually 0.75, but it's a single player game. Play how you enjoy playing. There's also difficulty adjusted technologies, and this just controls how much the selected difficulty affects the cost of technologies. The difficulty is, of course, in general and starts at civilian and goes all the way up to Grand Admiral. I believe this applies to every empire in the game as well, but it basically stops you going super far ahead of the AI because higher and higher tiered technologies will cost you more and more. Okay, so how do we get science then in the game? Well, you can work science jobs like we saw earlier. You can even get them from space deposits in space. And with Grand Archives, you can even get them from the specimens that can produce you more science. However, if you want stupid tech numbers like this number at 113 years in the game, you can see most of this comes from jobs. So we're going to focus on that now. Jobs are from planets, and you can view this in economy. and you can see we have 120 jobs, and that's because we have the archive zone when you first start the game. Per each city district you build, the archive will give you 20 physicists, 20 biologists, and 20 engineer jobs, and 40 bureaucrats, which give unity. You can see we have 3 city districts, so that's adding up to 60 of each. Where's the other 60 coming from? That's a second way to get jobs for science, is buildings such as the research lab. This just gives you a flat 60 of each, does not scale with the city districts or zone, but just gives the jobs and takes up a building slot, which are quite valuable. There'll also be technologies that unlock that give you new buildings to give you tech jobs, such as the Field Dynamics Center, which you can only build on one planet, which will give you 200 physicist jobs. That's a lot of jobs. And will give physics research per 100 physicists plus 1. This scales incredibly. Always build this. Now, I will talk a lot about jobs, but there are some caveats. For example, civilians, added in 4.0. They don't give science to start with, but if you build a monument, you can see civilians gain additional effects from our ethics, and they will then give us research. This is because we're materialists. If you also come to species, then set species rights and look at your living standards. If you are egalitarian, you can give your species utopian abundance, which means your civilians produce unity and research points. These do stack with the monument, so there's some ways to get science from not jobs. I just wanted to point them out. These are very hyper specialized, and you can make civilian builds or just eke out a bit more science if you have a lot of civilians. And we're not done there. There's certain civics that change up how you can get science, like genetic identification, giving society research per 100 bureaucrats plus 1.5. You could maybe make a build around this if you really wanted to, as there's also the auto-creating vault, which gives physics, society, and engineering research per bureaucrats plus 1 with a consumer good upkeep. These are the exceptions, not the rules. I just wanted to point out there were caveats. Let's get into the general where to build science. Now, in 3.14, I did a lot of science on my capital because the Empire capital gives you 10% resources from jobs, as well as a bit of stability and other things. This is great, 10% to science. But what about normal planets? Well, as you can see here on a normal planet, the tech world designation only reduces upkeep by 20%. This means you're not actually getting more output. However, it does save on consumer good deficit, so it's not bad, but I would turn my capital at some point in the game to research, as you can see here. I wouldn't immediately change the zones into science. I would build up the city districts because the archive's going to give you unity, science, and you're also going to get consumer goods and alloys. But once your consumer goods and alloys are fixed by making designated worlds, like this factory world, then you can look into change into a research enclave for more science jobs and less unity. The adaptability tradition also increases colony designation bonuses for regular planets. So if we take this and finish it, and then I put on a tech world, it will give 5% researcher output. You can also ascend worlds to boost these designations. Each time you ascend, the effects increase by 25% and you lower empire size. This also does increase the output. So if you're going really late game in ascending worlds, adaptability might be very good. If you want more science worlds and your capital's full, keep an eye out for modifiers, like weak magnetic field giving 10% physics research from jobs. Or you might find a relic world that gives you 30% total boost to science production in the features. You might have some habitats. The designation here does actually buff up research output. Just make sure you build it in a place that has research districts, because then you can build a lot of science jobs. Ring worlds also give a huge boost to science production, so might be worth building your science there. Ecomonopolises might not have the buff, but you can turn each city district into science and get extra building slots, so even more jobs. Now, how much do you cram the science in? Well, don't worry too much about stability. As long as this is over 50%, you're gaining resources from jobs. Stability buffs, as you can see, we are at 100% and getting 30% more output, isn't as good as just filling up regular science jobs, as if you've got loads of stability and no jobs being worked, what's the point in bonus? This is something that comes last once you've filled up all the jobs. To cure your amenities, you can build a luxury resident, which doesn't need any jobs and gives you amenities for free. I'd build one of those. Once you have specialized your worlds, you want to cram as much technology as possible. This is a good example for a general science world. We have both research enclaves giving a lot of jobs per city district, and then we have 20 out of 23 city districts being worked. We then have maxed out complexes giving +2 engineering research from jobs and job efficiency. It's the same for the biologists and the physics. We then have the research institute, giving +2 to physics, society, and engineering. We've then got more job efficiency from data-driven theorem, and then less upkeep. If I was being very, very rich, consumer goods are an issue. We did max out resources just to show examples, but we could replace this with more technology. We don't actually have any more research buffing buildings, so we just build a research lab, for example, which is just giving more jobs, and then we could just upgrade it 3 times for an extra lot of jobs, 180 of each. However, I do value the consumer goods. We've then gone for the Astral Nexus, unlocked from Astral Planes. This gives you more physics research output, and you get threads, and this changes all physicists into the astral researchers. They still give you physics research. We can see here we're still getting a lot of physics research, and you can see the job efficiency is going crazy. We're basically doubling the output. We've then gone for research support district. These give technician jobs and the research jobs, but they also give a 10% output. There is some complicated maths that's on Reddit somewhere that shows you the optimal amount. I've just built one for now because aside from science, we also get basic resource jobs. Just having those there is producing us 300 energy, 143 minerals, and 200 food. There's definitely going to be a sweet spot, but you can figure that out. Now remember, you need the pops to work these jobs. If I had all these jobs, but there was no one working them, I get none of the output. So make sure you don't expand too quickly. You have the pops to fill these jobs. Remember, this is quite later on in the game. I didn't instantly build all of this. We built it up as our species grew. Now, something I did experiment with in my members only series that this save is from was a dedicated planets. You can see here we have 2 physics, 2 engineering, and 2 society. This is the way if you have enough planets, because the physics research specialization gives you 100 per zone, whereas the normal research district only gives you 90. This will add up over time, and if you have the planets and the pops, it's definitely worthwhile specializing planets just into that research. It also allows you to min-max a bit more with these research supports, as we don't need the engineering and society buffs, we only need the energy one. So now we've got 3 energy research supports, giving us 30% more output. We also don't need the engineering and society research nexus, which means we've replaced those with the advanced research complexes, giving us a further 180 astral research jobs, and it does even give some biologists and engineers. You could just deprioritize them if you're struggling for pops, like so. I am not, because I went cloning with many pops, many pops. But you can see here, this planet's producing 2,400 physics research, whereas the one that's kind of mixed all of them, 871. It's far more efficient to do it this way. Then we have these buildings, which if we demolish it, we have the materials workshop, which gives us more jobs and +1 output. This makes a huge difference. As you can see, we've lost a lot of engineering. We click play, it goes up by a bunch. Then we can upgrade it again, goes to +2, and it goes up even more. We upgrade it again, and then it gives the job efficiency. For the best tech tips, you should subscribe to the channel. I play a lot of Stellaris. I cover a lot of how to play. Even in the gameplay videos, I walk through how I'm getting the ridiculous numbers. You'll pick up a few things and hopefully be entertained along the way. It's greatly appreciated. Next, in 4.0, you can assign a commander, a scientist, or an official to your planet, but they do different things. The base and what most people do is the governor. Per level on the planet, you'll get 2% of resources like energy, alloys, and strategic resources, and then this effect will propagate down. So Kerbo here is on Earth. Kerbo is not really on Earth, they're behind there. They're instead giving 1% per level. Now this leader is level 9, so on the capital, they're giving 18% more output. The base resources, but only 1% on the factory here. However, we do have Narissra Kutun, head of education as well, but they're a scientist on the planet. Now on the planet, they give 2% to the planet and then 1% to the sectors if they're on the sector capital. So you can see here, they're on Sirius Prime. Nosra does not go to this mining world, it's still Kerbo. But Nosra does overtake Kerbo's benefits to Sirius Prime. So I've made this a huge science world and put Nosra there so we get the scientist buffs. You might be thinking, why don't I have them on the capital? This sector has a lot of base resources, which I needed, so I've put Kerbo there. But as you can see in this technology sector, we have a scientist here. They're buffing up all these tech worlds, so it could be worth specializing even your sectors. This game has a lot that you can specialize. Don't worry if you can't be bothered. Now, it doesn't stop there with these governors. They can get traits, such as Erudite, which is actually reducing pop upkeep and amenity usage. We're not actually getting too many buffs to science here, but we do have Analyst Veteran class. This is from the Paragons DLC. You won't get these if you don't have that, but essentially we're getting 10% flat science on this planet, 5% on the stacked as well. And I believe there are some other traits that can buff up science on the planet. I don't actually have any, but just keep an eye out for them. This also does lead on to council positions. Now everyone will start with head of research, unless you're just alt, but it's kind of the same, don't worry. Per level, you get 2% research speed. I have a level 9 leader here, so we're getting 18% research speed. Come over technology, I am at 200% there, 178 here. It stacks up. You can see head of research is giving us plus 24%. That's weird, that doesn't add up. That is because if we hover over the name, you can see we're actually at skill level 9 plus 2. There are some modifiers that give you effective council position, and it can go over 10. So we're actually at 11 times 2 is 22. This means you do want really nice leaders and high level leaders on your council position, as they can give things like faction resource output or less upkeep from jobs. This is also from Paragons, but the research speed is huge. Get your best leader on there. Now, leaders also have traits that apply to the council. We have Statistician giving us 5% research speed. Manacle Free, 10%. We've got Expertise in here giving more research speed. Spark of Genius, more research speed. You can see that things get a little out of hand and just keep stacking. Now, they don't have to just be on head of research to apply these bonuses. Zarissa is also in the council. 50% research speed to biology and more chance for those. They stack up. There's also modifiers that you can get as you go through the game. For example, void loops. We're just getting physics from research jobs plus 10%. I believe that's from a amoeba or some event. Historical insight. I genuinely don't know where that's come from. Then we've got favored society agenda. 5% specialist applies to the scientists. Creator insight. We'll get into that later. 5%. There's just so many modifiers that can stack. Make sure you read the anomalies, make sure you do them, and you might get some bonuses. Also, if you come to species again and look at the species rights, if you are materialist, you can get academic privilege, which will give you 10% job efficiency from researcher jobs. This will cost you more consumer goods. As you can see, decent conditions, 0.5 specialists goes up to 1 for specialists. So your scientist is going to cost you 4 times more consumer goods, but it might be worth it. We are on utopian abundance. Like I said before, civilians will produce us some research, which is nice. When my planets just start filling up, we're just producing a little bit of science, but this would be better into jobs. However, there is another effect of utopian abundance and higher tier living standards, is that you get more happiness. Happiness means more stability, which means more resource from jobs. So it may be worth checking this in the game you're doing, raising from decent conditions and going up to utopian abundance, but maybe not chemical bliss, as you'll get minus 60% job efficiency. Read the small print. And mix it up a bit, we've gone Gestalt consciousness, because if you come over to government policies and edicts, and then production policy, you can actually focus either on menial at the expense of complex, or complex. Remember, complex is scientists, so going this would give your scientists 20% more output. Now, something huge I've not touched on, which does affect technology, is this big number here, because we're a big empire. Empire size is gained from districts, systems, colonies, and pops. The further you are over 100 empire size, the more your tech cost will increase. As you can see, we're at 328% more cost because we have 2034 empire size. This is negated by the fact I just have more pops and planets to produce more science, as we're at 46,000, and we're still making decent progress, but this will kind of rubber band you backwards if you expand too much. In the early game, you do want to try and play more tall and stay below the 100, as you can't really fill out planets. But in the late game, planets aren't going to be an issue, it's going to be pops. Now, a great way of actually reducing empire size is from the Ascension, which we talked about before. This planet is getting a total of minus 50% empire size, which does apply to the pops as well. We're slowly going down and ascending planets as I get unity. Traditions can reduce empire size. We have the civic beacon of liberty. We have psionic theory tech research. We have kinship, heightened attributes. There is a way to get this to minus 100% for pops. I've not done it, but we can lower it a bit. There's also the empire size effect modifier, which is quite rare. I've not seen too many ways of reducing this, but we're currently getting minus 15% effect, which means the 328% would be bigger, 15% bigger, if we didn't have these, and that's from compact living and great eminence. I'll leave it to you guys to go down the rabbit hole to find the best way of reducing effects. Don't think it's possible to get it to minus 100%, but I may be wrong. Next up is actually buying technology. That's right, you can kind of buy tech in the game. This is mainly from the creator order. They're an NPC. that you can find in a blue station. You'll make contact with them and then you can talk to them. You can click, can you aid us in our research? It will cost you some energy and then it'll give you 5% research speed for a 5% upkeep. This will expire and you can keep paying for it. Once you have 50 opinion though, you can then recruit one of their scientists. As you can see, we have Dr. Zib here and they also come with a council position, which is very, very strong. Per skill level of Dr. Zib, as they're the only one that can go on here, they get 2% more output for researchers empire-wide and 2% less upkeep. So they're currently at skill level 8, so they're giving 16% more output and 16% less upkeep. This is a must. You can reform your council and add this council position in, get Zib in. If Zib does die, you can just come over and recruit a new scientist. They just won't be a high level, but I believe they start at 5%. You can also come over to Salvager Enclave, and if you can't be able to click all the things up here, you can sort by planets, and all the enclaves have 0 planets, so you can easily find them. Come over to Diplomacy, and once you have a high enough opinion, which you get from buying things off them or scrapping things, you can get help in engineering research, which will give you 7% research speed for the cost of energy and alloys. This is something I always forget about. I need to remember. I believe the salvagers come from the Overlords DLC. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you should do this. It's not too bad, and I believe the cost scales with something in your empire, so it's not going to cost 3,150 alloys at the start of the game. It's worth it. Research speed is very nice. Now, the huge next mechanic that I feel like a lot of people get wrong is research agreements. As you can see here, it says we can learn 2 physics, 1 society, and 0 engineering, and we'll share 58 physics, 80 society, and 72 engineering. This does not mean we're going to get that science added to our output. It means if they've, for example, researched technology we haven't, when we research it, we will get a 50% research speed bonus. To show this, let's form a research agreement with them, then we'll actually switch to playing them. Why do they have such a long ID? Now, if we come over to our research technologies, so you can see now we have research subspace sensors as UNE, but this empire that we switched to hasn't. So they're getting a 25% bonus to this technology on each one because we have them. You can see they actually have a research agreement with the different empire, Galerian, and you can see this does not stack because I do have quantum missiles, but you don't get multiple of these. This means the only reason you'd want more than one research agreement is if maybe they have focused on different tech trees. You could min-max it with your friends. One of you focus physics, one of you focus society, one of you focus engineering, and then you do a research agreement between you all, but it does not stack and it doesn't give you a raw output. But it does help. If you are behind, this is really good to use on a friendly empire near you that might have a lot of technologies. If not, don't waste the influence on it unless you have loads and you don't care. And what I have found out from the previous video we did on technology is that repeatables count for all tiers. So the first repeatable you do will give you the research speed for all of them. So if you're late game, you might want to make a research agreement because you'll just get a 25% speed on top of everything else here. The next factor is forming a federation. To form a federation in 4.0, you need the federation code technology. And then to make a scientific federation like we're doing, you either need to be materialist or have gone the discovery tradition. You then come over to your best friend, form federation, research cooperative. Once the federation is formed, you can put a leader in there to start leveling up. The more cohesion you have, the faster you will gain XP. And to start with, at level 1, you get a free and automatic research agreement between all Federation members, so you're going to help each other out. This might be bad if you don't want the AIs to be strong with research, because you could help them out a lot. Once it levels up, the research speed from the research agreements goes up by 5%, so 30%. You just get a 5% research speed modifier and you get a research alternative. Pretty nice. You then get a further 5% increase to the research agreement at level 3. Rare techs are more likely to appear if someone else has unlocked it, and you get more diplomatic weight from tech. Another 5% research speed from the research agreements. You also get 10% research speed if an endgame crisis is going on, and an extra envoy if you're the president. The final level, you'll get a further 5% speed from your research agreements, another 10% speed if endgame crisis is going on, and the president gets a +1 to megastructure build capacity. Pretty nice. Is this the best federation type? Not really. If you're with friends who are really tech rushing as well, you could benefit massively from it. But the AI's not always the best. Trade Fed's probably better, but it won't hurt. You could even, if you have some trash sectors, like I don't really have trash sectors, but Silex here, you come over to planets and sectors and then create a vassal in this screen, and you will lose all the empire size, but also the resources, so don't do it on a really good sector. Relics is not producing us too much, so we could create a vassal, but then we are not getting the empire size from the 2 planets, 12 sectors, and 9.4 thousand pops. You do have to be peace though, we're at war. You can steal your vassals' technology or give them technology. Very strong, especially early game, especially if they're Grand Admiral. They'll get a lot of bonuses, which you can then steal their resources. But you can also make up a Stellarium. Now Stellarium will give your subject monthly research, but will take away their naval capacity and increase their military ship build cost and upkeep. However, they will get physics caches, society, random research, but it will give the Overlord monthly scientific research. Now, I don't believe this stacks anymore, so it may be worth just getting a Stellarium. It did stack before, but just a 10% research to everything. It's pretty nice. Then if you actually connect your relay networks, building a hyper relay, you'll get 10% researcher output. Very, very strong. I think this could stack. Don't quote me on it though. Then as the tiers go up, they get more science and less military, up to 40%. So it could be worth becoming a Stellarium early game, but you won't have a navy. The Stellarium scientists will get some nice traits, and you can trade for them, so it might be worth getting them to get those leaders and then steal them from them, and then the caches can go up and contain rare technologies for the subject, and you can actually reduce accuracy with a science chip. Now the main thing is that monthly scientific research and the hyper relay, and maybe stealing their science. It's probably worth getting a Stellarium. Something else you can do is come over to Espionage and actually steal technologies. This will give you either a random unknown technology or a small amount of research. If you really want to go down espionage, this can help you progress through tech a little bit. Will it make up for raw technology? No. Do I do it in my games? No, because I feel like it's really finicky. You have to keep clicking it. I just can't be bothered. Costs you influence, which is quite important early game. But it's an option. A good one? Probably not. But it's one of the better campaigns, as well as smuggling population to steal some pops. Megastructures. The Science Nexus, when fully maximized, gives you a base of 300 of each tech, no jobs needed here, and a 75 energy upkeep. You also get a 15% research speed bonus to your techs. This is it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, it does cost you 5,000 unity and 5,000 alloys to begin with. However, you can only build one of them. It's worthwhile getting, especially for the research speed, as of course, remember that applies to your raw output, so 15%. It's not too shabby, but I wish you could build more of them. You also may get some events to sacrifice scientists into it to buff it up more, up to if you want to, but you should build it if you've unlocked mega engineering. It will help you. Now, of course, this wouldn't be a tech video without the lathe. You get the lathe by going Cosmogenesis, a crisis path. You'll get some nice bonuses like monthly physics research, society, engineering, or physics, but more specifically, the ability to construct the lathe megastructure. Now, the more neural gates you make, the more physics, society, and engineering per 100 neural chips, which is this job that is crammed full of 14,000 pops. You can also build buildings that buff and help reduce the upkeep. But essentially, neural chips will have an upkeep of energy, but produce you science. We are producing 15,000 from the lathe from 14,000 pops, and we are trying to buff it up by expanding it, ascending it, upgrading the process unit. But this is one of the endgame ways to cure lag and increase your science by building the lathe. Now, it's not sustainable because obviously these pops do get purged. They will die, but it could be worth it. There will be building upgrades that you can get as you research through technologies, but it does make your empire go very, very bare, and you can just abduct pops and put them there. As you can see, this number's going down as time goes on, so this tech and energy deficit is not permanent. I was also told Become the Crisis gives you access to more techs, and also going down Become the Crisis Behemoth gives you research speed to biology, society, and you can get some tech from food jobs, which is pretty cool. There's also some edicts that can help you out. Super late game, once you have all the ascension perks and you get the tech, you can get 20% research speed, but for 20% upkeep. Remember that any bonuses that give you resources from jobs or specialist output also apply to scientists, like Astral Binding. And then the only other edict actually comes from Discovery, when you get data bank uplinks for research subsidies. This gives you 10% output, but for an energy credit upkeep. Now, on the topic of traditions, Discovery obviously is the science one. You get 10% research speed when you finish it. You can get research from Starbase Constructions and station output by 20% and reduced upkeep. It doesn't actually give too much to output, but you obviously also get the edict. But like I keep saying, anything that buffs up specialist output or resource from jobs like prosperity also will apply. You can of course go tech ascendancy, which gives you 10% more research speed, and rare technologies have a bigger chance of appearing, which can be really nice. Then there's different ascension paths like cloning. For example, you can get erudite, which gives you 30% job efficiency, but you have to remove intelligent to take it. Then there's machines that can get you other traits for just flat output. The biological ones also have that, like robust, giving 5% job efficiency. Now, anomaly and event will give you science based on your monthly science. So you might see in some of my games, I don't research them straight away until my empire is kind of up and running. This is because, well, we need the scientists to explore and survey to expand, but also we can raise the monthly science up. So when we finish the events and we get a science reward, we get it based on the monthly, which is going to be more later on. The techs are more expensive, but you kind of hit a maximum once you've finished exploring and you've populated your planets and you're working these science jobs. There are also some relics you can find and activate them to give you research speed, such as the defragmentator. And you also have the artifacts. We have the crystallized Cuffaloid eye giving us a base of 10 physics, and this is going up because of physics insights and buildings and the creators buffing it. Not that good. Could be good early on. Really, what is 13 to 43,000? I am getting 50 here. It's not great. There's a way to buff it up with traditions, but honestly, I wouldn't focus on this. It's a nice bonus to have, but the percentage modifier specimens are far better as this scales with your economy and your planets. And I believe you cannot get science percent bonuses. It just gives you a flat amount, like with Unity. We also have the Astral actions. Once you've opened, I believe, 3 or 4 rifts, you will get Astral siphons that you can activate for the cost of Astral threads. This building, when built, will give you more Astral thread capacity, but also give more physics per 100 physicists and Astral threads with a cost of consumer upkeep. You can see we go from 894 to 982 just building that building. There will be then a cooldown, and when you activate it again, you can activate it 3 times, you will get the upgrade, which just boosts what it produces even more. So we go up to 1067, then we can do it again, 1237. These are worthwhile going for. They do have an energy upkeep, but it's worth it giving your physics researchers +4 output per 100. That is insane. That is double what the Nexus is, and I said that was an incredible building. Really worth doing the astral plane stuff. In terms of when you're making your empire, you can get intelligent for 10% more researcher output, which is pretty nice. Then you have these specialized techs like natural engineers, which will give 15% only to engineering, physics, or society. I do recommend taking one of these, and you can only take one of them. You can't take all 3. There's some new traits with 4.0, such as camouflage, giving 10% to physics, which doesn't stack with natural physicists, but you could take natural engineers and camouflage, so you're getting 10% there, 50% there, 10% overall there. Chromologs costing 4 gives 20% to physics output. You can't stack it with natural physicists, but again, you can take natural engineers. Funny enough, you can't actually take camouflage as well as chromologs. Kind of makes sense. And there are no negatives to tech, so you can't ruin your tech more. There's then different traits for machines. You can get 2% research job output from research assistants. You have engineering core for 15% and physics core. This is like the natural. Before, and logic engines is like intelligent. However, we do have adaptive frames, which gives traits automatically depending on what the pops are working, and logic engines is in there, so you can get the 10% research from that. There's also some differences with different origins. For example, overtuned could give you further science output. Then there's civics, such as civil education, giving your civilians more research output. Crowdsourcing, changing factions into science rather than unity. Dark Consortium would give you an edict to give you more monthly physics output, as well as dark matter from physicists from your council position. Genesis guides will also give you some biologist jobs. Genetic identification gives your bureaucrat society output. Meritocracy, specialist output, 10%. Applies to scientists. Natural design gives you society research from medical workers. Planetscapers gives you 10% more resource from jobs. Imperial, the authority, would give your capital 10% more resource from jobs too. Scavengers would give you research from debris. Technocracy would replace politician jobs with science directors, and you also start with expertise traits giving you further research speed. It's pretty good. Now, this was a monster of a video. I've tried to include everything, tried to keep it for every level, but if I have forgotten something, leave it in the comments. If you want to learn more, go read the comments. There might be even more information there. With this information, you will be able to skyrocket your technology, be very efficient, and hopefully conquer the galaxy. Maybe name a planet after me. That'd be nice. If you want some more general tips about Stellaris, go check out the 13 tips I wish I knew earlier about Stellaris 4.0 by clicking right here. Click it now.